with the energy code, which is of note, but none of those four identify Energy Star currently as an alternative. I just bring that up because Energy Star was proposed previously, and I believe there will be some more discussion today on that. So not to say that, you know, the city of Tucson is taking a stance one way or the other at this point. Just wanted to make you aware that this hasn't been implemented elsewhere in the state as of yet. So that's the update on the adoption for the other cities in the state. And then the one additional proposed amendment from last month on voltage drop has been included in the city of Tucson's proposed amendments. I believe you have a sheet in front of you with the one page of the amendments that includes that new proposed amendment that was voted on last month. And that's it for the city.
And this is Dan with the county. Also, since you guys are updated, the county's updated amendments with the voltage drop change that was suggested by Dennis.
This is Rick. I got a question. Are those municipalities that adopted the current energy code, did they adopt the 21 or did they skip it?
Because I believe that there are only 2 or 3 cities in the state that adopted the 21, one of which is Scottsdale, which is not currently moving forward with the 24. They probably will. It is highly likely that they will. I just didn't see any current active initiatives right now at the moment to adopt the 24. I believe there are 2 other cities that have the 21, but I don't have that information on hand. Most of those cities jumped from the 2018 to the 24.
Correct. It's always a shock.
Yeah. So this is Ken Cawthorn. I also reached out to Phoenix, the plan reviewer. I forget his name right off the top of my head, but I talked to him. He currently has only reviewed basically tenant improvements that he's seen come through with the 2024. They've had new buildings go through, but they've all been under the 2018 still. So I also reached out to other engineers up there, and what I'm seeing people are doing is, so just to let everybody know, so to get the energy code to pass, you have to go through those additional energy credits. And to do that is, you know, it's quite a task to go through that. So what I'm seeing, what I'm in talking to other engineers in Phoenix area, what they're all doing, most of them are doing, is they're mostly going and getting an energy model done, because the energy model allows APS up there is paying for 50% of all energy models during design phase. So the energy model is already discounted, and they use that energy model then to show compliance. But if they do it per the IECC, remember we had that amendment locally where we changed the calculation so that we didn't have to be the 22.5% better plus the this other value better than codes, which were for business, it's going to be about, you have to be about 30% better than the code just to get compliance. So what they've been doing is they've been going and just doing it per ASHRAE 90.1 and showing compliance that way, because that one I think only requires like 5% better or 6% better than code. So it's a much lower value, much easier to show compliance. So that's what I'm hearing most of the people are doing, is the energy model, because of the fact that APS is paying for it, and it's just much easier to do that than to go through all those steps. We did try a building to go through those steps, and we were unable to get it to be compliant because there was, what we found was, so although we had very high efficiency mechanical system, a good lighting system, we actually had photovoltaics, it still didn't, and we still couldn't get enough points doing it the point method, what do they call it? The showing through 406.1 method, that method, we couldn't show compliance because we were just too many points short. And so what you would have to do, there's one of the points is this TSPR, which is total system performance, HVAC. It's a HVAC total system performance calculation you go through, which is basically another energy model. And the reason it's so awkward is because if you did an energy model and you couldn't show that you were 30% better, then what you would do is you'd use that energy model to at least get your TSPR points to try to do it prescriptively on your points. So an energy model is going to be required almost no matter whether you want to go through it prescriptively or you want to do the energy model. So if you're going to do the energy model, you might as well just do ASHRAE 90.1 is what we're seeing. And so that's what we're seeing most people are going to be doing to show compliance. I think you're still going to have to go through the comp check to show compliance with mechanical, electrical, just to be minimum code. And you can still do that is what it looks like. You can still print out just mechanical compliance and just electrical compliance and envelope compliance. But it still wants to try to do the total prescriptive method of way to do it. So I think what I'm guessing that you guys will be seeing is energy models and the comm check of just individual components, similar to what the comm check would be similar to what you're seeing now. But the difference is that with the comm check, as you go through, just to let everybody here know too, as you go through and do that design, as you go through and do that, fill out that comm check, it asks you for what sheet that information is referenced on. So what we're telling architects to do too is that, you know how you have a code compliance sheet at the front, and that we're telling them you probably need to now have an energy compliance sheet just to make it easier to reference. And so that's one of the things we're seeing. Otherwise, every job is going to be, you know, where is this reference and where's, because every time you put something in, you input something in there to ask where is that, what sheet is that referenced on? You know, so that then it allows the building official or whoever's reviewing the plans to go back and back check that. So that's how that's working. So that's what I'm seeing on the energy modeling side, is that an energy model is going to be done just about no matter what.
Okay.
Because to get to the points you need, if you're going to do it prescriptively, you still got to do an energy model. And if you don't want to do it prescriptively, you just use the energy model to get you your overall building. And most people are doing it per ASHRAE 90.1 because of that calculation that's in the base code that we've amended locally. That's why people up in Phoenix area and those other jurisdictions are just doing it per 90.1. But we could go ahead and do it per IECC because we've amended it. So that's what I'm saying.
And in the chat, Jim Myers states, and Scottsdale has more stringent requirements than base 2021 code. And Christie also states Cave Creek, Queen Creek, and Globe have also adopted the 2021 IECC.
Okay. I wonder if they just recently adopted that, or did they adopt that instead of the 24? Or is this, had already adopted it from back in 22? I'm wondering.
This is Jim here. Can I speak up?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Ken and crew. Hi,
Hey,
Clayton and Dan. It's been a while since those communities have adopted 2021. So it's been, I want to say 2 years.
right.
For Cave Creek and Queen Creek. I'd have to look up Globe. I don't remember the date for Globe.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. What is a typical energy model cost?
So it depends on the size of the building. I mean, a typical one is about 10K. Up in Phoenix, they're going, if it's a small building, it's probably going to still be about 5K, even the smallest building. So But up in Phoenix, you gotta remember APS pays for 50% of that.
Which is not the case with TEP.
Not the case with TEP or SRP. So that's something we could start pushing the utility company for, you know, to match what APS is doing. But right now they're not. So just about every building in Phoenix is that's any building that's got an APS is doing it anyways, because it's just already there and it's just easier and it's much lower cost than to try to even do this prescriptive. Because even if you do it prescriptively, you're still going to probably need to do the energy model just to get your points that you need to pass. Because you want that HVAC TSPR number.
This is Dennis. Unless we stick with our amendment that ups the square footages, or are we still?
Correct. You even if we, this can, but even if you up the square footage, if you get to that 50,000 square feet, it's probably still less expensive to do an energy model than to do it prescriptively.
Yeah, so my sense is that what's really gonna get hurt by this 2024 are the small buildings, if we don't offer some relief for that.
Right.
And the bigger buildings, the cost of the energy model on, say, a per square foot basis, the bigger the building gets, the smaller that cost is. And it becomes incidental or beneficial compared to all the engineering required the other way. But on a tiny building, which I know we do a lot of those,
Right.
then it becomes a real burden to either have to use a prescriptive method and get the points or pay for the energy model. So that's why it seems to me like the direction that we went on the amendment to raise the square footages is probably still appropriate. And the fact that the other jurisdictions have adopted these with fewer amendments, well, they haven't run into any problems because nobody's been subject to having to just use that prescriptive method to comply.
Correct. And this is Ken. And even if they're under APS, again, 50%. So instead of it being 5,000 for a 3,000 square foot building, which is a big hit, it's only $1,500 because, or $2,500 because APS is paying half of it. So that helps soften the blow for the Phoenix metropolitan area, Maricopa County area. Well, and APS reaches down to a lot of other areas too, you know, and so those areas also, but not in the city of Tucson. Some areas of Pima County have APS though, right?
Like Ajo.
Right. So
We're more TEP and Trico.
right.
Well, this is Rick. I got a question you probably don't know the answer to. How does the energy model compare with the real world once the building's built? That used to be a problem.
Right, so it depends. So that's a loaded question. So it depends on how it's operated, right? So if the idea of the energy model is to try to model it as closely as possible to how it's going to operate. And so then, and I know there's been numerous evaluations on that where that show that some of these energy models are actually very accurate. But that doesn't mean that the occupants are going to operate it the way we've asked them to. And so that would, you know, they might override things and operate them differently. So, or reprogram things, you know, because realize everything's now programmable. So you got lights with occupancy sensors that can be overridden. You've got HVAC with set points that can be overridden and changed. You've got, all that. So it all can be changed so that it would not match what the energy model stated.
So it depends.
It depends.
This is Dennis. Is that even relevant though? It really is the energy model going to produce the same results that following a prescriptive method?
So that,
for this, under the same operating under, say, that standard operating condition. I mean, if you follow this, if you model it and say your HVAC set points are gonna be a certain, 74 summer and 70 in winter or something. And now the occupant changes those, colder in the summer, warmer in the winter, it's gonna use more energy.
right,
But if you design per prescriptive method and somebody operates it, it's at the same set point, say, as the energy model, are you gonna be in the same ballpark of energy
Oh, yeah.
savings?
exactly.
And so I don't see the relevance one way or the other, because you can't, at this point, we're not controlling how people set their thermostats and
Right.
how long they leave their lights on.
Right.
Well, the reason I raise it is when I first started doing this, they were way off. So
Yeah,
hopefully
it-
they've gotten better over the years.
True. A lot of it depends on who's doing the energy model too. So you have somebody that has experience doing an energy model, and because there's a lot of data that has to get input into those. And that's why they cost what they cost. Okay, so, and if you get somebody that doesn't know, so for instance, even Revit will do energy models now, but that doesn't mean everything we inputted into Revit was correct. Right? So if you, it's garbage in is garbage out. So if you put in bad data, you'll get bad results. So that's, I think that's the biggest thing with the energy. The energy models themselves are usually, because they go through and they tell you what energy models are acceptable. And those out there that are acceptable are usually pretty good, and they model it very, very well. But that doesn't mean somebody can input it all incorrectly and give you some garbage out.
So is that something that the plan reviewer can evaluate?
It's
Tough.
It would be unless they know how to do an energy model. It'd be like, how do they know mechanical, or do they know electrical, plumbing, architectural, structural? Unless they know that stuff, it's going to be hard for them to review it. So yes, somebody can manipulate it to show that it passes, and whether the plan reviewer can figure that out is a challenge. And I don't know how to, I think a lot of the jurisdictions are just saying that's why you have your seal on it, is because you're saying that you've done this to the best of, you've done this correctly. So it's entrusting that seal. Other than that, I don't know what to say.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Zane with the city of Tucson. Just with your question of seeing how accurate the energy model is after the commissioning of the building, is that not typically what the energy monitoring is for, to see how accurate your model was?
So the energy monitoring is only required, it's only required to be reported to, it's not required to be reported to anybody. It's just required to be provided. Whether that gets reported to anybody or not, is up to them. But let's say
the
it's,
building owner at least.
well, it could be, but it's not, it doesn't say it has to be submitted to anybody. So let's say you do have a building owner or a building manager that wants that information. Yes, that's what it's supposed to be for. Is he's supposed to be receiving that energy model, that energy use information, and comparing that to the model to try to figure out, are we operating this correctly? So that's the intent.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the intent is to make sure you're operating your building per what the energy model is, and what basically this is saying, how it's saying to operate it.
Yeah, this is right. So that gets to be problematic with the smaller building. Large buildings, they have the
Right.
staff that can deal with this. 5,000 square foot building doesn't have the personnel to deal with that. Downside.
Right. And it may just be a leased building anyways, right? So it's owned by somebody and leased that, yeah.
Dennis, I have another question. So if an energy model is done, who is who's the actual person doing that? Do you have people in your office that are gonna be physically doing that, or are you hiring an outside consultant? And if this becomes the norm for all the projects, is there enough availability of people to actually accomplish all this and get those models done?
Right. So this is Ken. So our office, yes, we have people that do energy models, but we do probably one a year, maybe two if it's a lot of things. But so we typically, especially on lead projects where energy modeling is required, those energy models are scrutinized very in a lot of detail. And so we usually, what we do is we send those out and have a third party do those energy models for lead. For these larger buildings in our jurisdictions, we'd probably go ahead and send it out because they're just larger and more complicated. And therefore we'd probably send it out. Other firms may decide to do it in-house. And they have people in-house that do their energy models. So a lot of the firms in Phoenix do their own energy models. And some of the firms in Tucson do their own energy modeling. But it's usually on a larger building, not so much a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot building. Just because the cost of doing the energy model would exceed any benefit on that small of a building.
So your consultant is licensed?
I don't know if you need to be licensed to be an energy modeler. Good question.
But you're sealing?
But we're sealing it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're reviewing it and sealing it.
Okay. That's allowed for the tech board?
I think so, because it's not really a design. That's a good question. That's a really,
A lot of stuff that
Or
doesn't,
they
Right.
be considered a collaborating professional. and
Yeah.
you can-
well, if they're licensed, yes.
yeah. I think usually they've been sealing it, but whether that's required or not, that's a good question. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. But usually they've been sealing.
Well,
So,
well, the tech board requirements.
The
are
ones
very
we- the
antiquated,
ones we
and so
use.
they don't really keep up with
right,
what's happening in the profession.
right.
Okay. So we have some amendments.
Yeah.
So do we need to go over those?
No, the only one that was added was the voltage drop one that Dennis suggested last
Which we've
month,
already,
which is in there.
Everything else is what we've done previous.
okay. So we're square on the commercial part of the energy code?
Well, yes. I am. I think we should leave the amendments that we currently have, even though they are, as Clayton pointed out, much more strict than other jurisdictions. Because
That's the opposite.
Less strict.
we're less strict, right? We have more amendments, you're right. And so, because many of the jurisdictions have the same amendments as far as in section 405, but I haven't seen anybody have any amendments in section 406. And that's the one to me that is requiring the energy model, basically.
Well, there's no reason we can't revise it.
Later, right.
2 years.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns in house.
Right, and we may find that
People,
the city or county may want us to start reducing those square footages down to be more in line with other jurisdictions too, so.
and once you get a better sense how it's all gonna play out. Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense. Okay, and then on the residential side, our home builders had an alternate that they wanted to use?
This is Tom Faze. As a individual custom home builder, I'm concerned about the costs that we will be impacted by with the adoption of the IECC the way it is right now. We talked a lot about commercial, I understand that, but home building in general, I just think that the buildings are going to be so small that it's going to be an undue burden to bear those costs.
So So this is Ken. That would just fall under though the IRC. And there's that chapter that we've currently amended because we just haven't adopted the IECC yet. But I think that would change back to the IRC once we've adopted the 2024 IECC, or is that the same?
This is Clayton. That is not the intent for the city. The intent is for the amendment in chapter 11 of the IRC to remain in perpetuity,
Okay,
continuously referring back to the currently adopted Energy Conservation Code. So should the Energy Conservation Code be adopted, it would be the residential portions of the IECC that then would apply to single family homes.
gotcha. Okay.
Do you have a specific concern on some of the requirements?
No, just an overall concern that it's gonna add too much to the cost of the building. We want to show improvement in energy consumption.
Right. Rick, me, the chair.
Yes.
David Godleski Saba. I agree with the sentiments expressed by Member Hayes. I think one of the objectives and one of the things that we've advocated for is code consistency throughout the region. It's our understanding that Marana, Oro Valley, and Sahuarita have determined that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. And so they're not moving forward with the adoption of the 2024 IECC. One of the things that we had proposed, if the city was intent on moving forward in the county, the committee would be to look at an alternative compliance method, being Energy Star. Energy Star, my understanding, at least all of our member builders are using some form of Energy Star. Energy Star is an above code program. So if you're on Energy Star 3.1 today, you're building a home that's using 10% less energy than the 2018 base code requires. So I think that's an indication that the market is responding and building homes that are more energy efficient than are required. We had previously submitted some information that I think it's in the range of $3,000 or so per house to go from the 2018 to the 2024 building code. We continuously hear by policymakers at the local, state, and federal level about the importance of affordable housing. And at some point, we think there should be a recognition between how building codes and other municipal regulations affect the cost of affordability. And think that in light of the other jurisdictions not moving forward with the IECC, that's appropriate for the city and the county to forego that as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Like one, listen, Rick, doesn't that require some kind of commissioning of it? In other words, somebody has to go out physically inspect it.
For the, this is David, the Energy Star would require a third-party test. And so those builders who are currently doing Energy Star use a third-party rater to test those homes.
And these are what that includes. Testing.
I do.
Dan does.
Now, this is for version 3.3, and that down. That's the checklist the rater uses when they go out for inspection.
So they, like a duct test and a lower door test.
Yeah, yes, there are air change requirements and everything else they gotta meet with the Energy Star. Version, if I'm reading this right, starting on January 1st, builders or Energy Star raters will have to use the 3.3, which is 8 to 10% more efficient than the 2024 IECC prescription.
Yeah. Well, this is right. So we've had some projects where we had to do a HERS rating, which you had to do the test inspection. And, we had a duct loss of 30%. And they couldn't pass the lower door. So the way I look at it, you can have all the regulations, but if they're not getting it implemented properly, so having it commissioned, somebody look at that stuff to make sure it applies. You get more bang for the buck than additional requirement. want to take on it? I don't know what Ken's view is.
So this is Ken, my thought is, okay, so the the residential section of the IECC requires just you have 10 points rather than this whole 65 to however many points. And you realize you've got probably about 50 choices to get to the 10 points. And you could do it just by improved efficiency on mechanical or improved lighting. I mean, there's a whole lot of, or by the building tightness. So there's a whole lot of options in here for getting 10 points. I don't think it's that, and so you could do it fairly. It doesn't look like it's I mean, I don't see anything that's like overwhelming that, you can't do that.
But does that require the testing, the blower door?
That's what I was just looking for. Some of the points may require it. I'm not seeing where it is required.
I think the
5.1.2 air leakage testing.
For the
The buildings or each dwelling, maybe until they test the air leakage. That's the building. But during testing, it's just the building.
Because when you run through the calculation, you're assuming the tightness of the building,
Right.
which may ultimately end up tight or not.
R 403.3.7 duct system testing, page 324.
Yeah, the duct testing is usually required.
This is Clayton with the city. It's our understanding that closed door and duct testing is required regardless of the compliance path.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas Hayes, so are they increasing the values that we would have to achieve
In the
in the new proposed code compliance?
comparative from the 2018 to the 2024, yes.
To a large degree?
I can't speak definitively to the percentage of difference. It is an increase. I think it also should be of note that Energy Star, also based on my understanding, is relative to the adopted IECC. So at current, Energy Star 3.2 would be required based on our adopted 2018. If and when the 2024 IECC is adopted, Energy Star 3.3 would be required.
Okay.
Because Energy Star is an above code program.
Okay. So what's the cities and counties view on using this as an alternative?
We've been allowing it since 2012. Codes were adopted as an alternative method, as an above code method. This was Dan, by the way, with the county. So.
This is Clayton. We would also be supportive of using an alternative compliance path. We would just request that if we go down the path of making an amendment to specify such, that we clarify that it's for new buildings, new residences, to help alleviate any confusion associated with renovations of these buildings.
So this is David. So is that, you're saying that it would be 3.3 is what you would accept as the alternative compliance path to 2024?
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. It is my understanding that the way Energy Star works is it's a requirement based on the currently adopted code. So if we adopt the 2024, it automatically invokes Energy Star 3.3 because it's an above code program.
This is David with Saba. We would not support 3.3 as, I think the intent would be that we're saying that using Energy Star 3.1, you're still building a home that's more energy efficient than what's being built today to 2018. And so
I think it's 3.2 that is more.
3.2, forgive me, this is Brendan. 3.2 is related to 2021.
Is it 2021?
Yes, sir.
Let's try that. Okay. Thanks, Brandon.
Well, this is right. I mean, look at where the energy codes are headed. It keeps ratcheting up. So it kind of should be expected that you're gonna have to ratchet things up. And the question is, at what point do you have diminishing returns? Your argument is we're having diminishing returns or it's too expensive.
This is David at Saba. I would say it's, I can't speak to the specifics about the gain. I mean, I think you had talked about, referenced HERS before. I mean, I think that's part of it is what are we trying to achieve, right? And if we're looking at energy efficiency and we want to establish a threshold of a HERS score, I think those are the kind of things that should be looked at. And we'd certainly be willing to have that type of conversation. And Mr. Chair, I don't think we're arguing that there shouldn't be improvements in home construction to increase energy efficiency. I think it's a balancing act. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that at least the builders that I speak with are on Energy Star 3.1 or greater, which is more efficient than the code today. So I think the private sector, the market is working to build more energy efficient homes. And so that's where I think we don't think the code is needed, or at least the size of the increase between going from 2018 to 2024, which is about a 18% decrease in energy efficiency, is needed. So we're looking to find some way to be able to achieve or ensure that homes are more energy efficient than what's being done today without going the full measure of the 2024 code. That's really the intent there.
Anybody have any thoughts?
Support what he said.
Do you use Energy Star?
We do the duct tightness and the blower door, and we do Energy Star appliances, yeah. It depends on.
Appliances, but not the Energy Star building. But which is different. Okay. And you have any thoughts?
I mean, my initial thought is to, still keep this, but as an alternative path, Energy Star, which is not referenced, is what I was just looking for. It's not, I didn't see Energy Star.
It's the building official. This is Dan. It's the building. Section 401.1.1 gives the building official.
Okay. Yeah. So like ASHRAE's referenced, or ANSI, some of the ANSI standards are referenced. So, but Energy Star was not.
Yeah. Let me see how.
So the only concern I have is adopting 3.1 would be the same level as the 2018 energy code. So and if adopting the 3.2 would be, like Dan was saying, with similar to the 2020, above the 2021, right?
This is Clayton with the city. I believe 3.1 would be most similar to the 2021.
Okay.
And 3.2 would be most similar to 2024. We don't have an exact comparison of those, but as 3.1 is above code, above 2018, it would match 2021. However, the values in 2021 are different than the values in 2024 because of that rollback that occurred with the ceiling insulation, things like that.
Right. And and this is Ken. So the thing I'm not sure of is, like, does Energy Star also in their requirements, I don't know if they go through. So do they use the SEER in the 3.1 or 3.2 version? Do they go through and use SEER 2 values rather than the original SEER values for mechanical? And are they using the most, the minimum required that's currently required? So those are some questions I have that I don't know if it would have in here.
So, this is right. So currently under the 218, if they did 3.1, that would be acceptable under the current IEC?
Correct.
This is the city. So we would accept Energy Star 3.1 currently, while the 2018 is in effect, because it essentially establishes a higher criteria than our currently adopted code.
This is Brendan, Wasaba, which is also much further than our neighboring jurisdiction.
I don't think that's gonna fly with the city council, but,
Understood.
oh,
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. I just want to point out, we are striving for regional consistency in all that we do with this committee, and that is a great value and importance to us. And also, it as the second largest jurisdiction in the state, I think it is also a certain value to exceeding the values of some of our smaller neighbors.
but if we adopted the 2024, then that would be 3.2 or 3.3?
3.3.
3.3.
I think and I'm not positive, but the energy requirements in 24. That to insulation and everything were way higher than they are in 24. My understanding is 2024 is closer to what it was in 2018.
In terms of insulation.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, this is Ken. So you're correct. The 2024 insulation values are almost identical to the 2018 insulation values. The thing that I think has changed that makes it hard to check like those jurisdictions that are keeping the 2018 energy code, the problem you have as building officials is how do you, the comm check won't do a SEER 2 with the 2018. It only does SEER. And they don't have the new equipment rated with the old values. They only have SEER 2 values. And so you're just shooting from the hip and saying, yeah, that's more efficient by about that much, so it should work. But they don't get that. They don't get both ratings because they'd have to go through AHRI and rate both the systems for both, and they don't do that.
Okay, this is right. Isn't there a conversion table for?
No.
No? Okay.
There's an estimate. You can estimate it,
Well,
but it's not a
it wasn't,
because it's tested differently.
right.
That's the main thing is, so there's really not a straight conversion. So I think that's the hard part in using the old code is you're just saying that this is more efficient. So it's got to be, it's probably about, and it looks like it's, 10% more. So it should be okay. So.
But all the equipment coming out on the market, there's.
SEER 2 now. Yes. The residential equipment, right?
Okay.
The smaller equipment.
So that's the downside because the old code doesn't address.
Correct. Right. Even the DOE doesn't address it. So even our, the new requirements. So they're different.
It's the 21 have SEER 2.
Yes, the 21 does have SEER 2. So more than likely the 3.2 would have the SEER 2 because of the timing of it would be my guess. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with Energy Star to know that. I'd have to go back through and check.
Do any of our builders know the answer to that?
No, I think though that, we don't like 2021. We appreciate that you didn't adopt that one. I do think it's been improved for the 2024 version. What about 2024 and 3.2 as a alternative option? That's something that might be.
Yeah, Dan?
This is Dan. I'm not positive, because I really didn't look into that. But it seems to me with the 2021s having steeper requirements, that the 3.2 would also impose steeper requirements than the 3.3 would.
At least with regard to
Energy.
insulation.
The insulation, right?
But there may be other technology required This is Dennis. For example, the prescriptive requirement for electrical will be no longer using light switches in any of the residential occupancies. They will have to be a controllable switch that senses occupancy and automatically turns the lights off. And there's also a requirement that the lights be dimmed. So permanently installed lights will all have to be dimmed, and they will all have to have that special control. So instead of a $2 or $3 light switch, you're now going to have a $50 application. So, you know, the concerns for cost, that's probably a pretty big hit on any home when you consider how many light switches you end up with.
Clayton with the city of Tucson. One other option to consider is something else that the municipalities in the Phoenix area have been implementing is changing the energy rating index, or the ERI. So this is fairly consistent with the cities that have adopted the 2024 of modifying through an amendment the required ERI from 51 to 57. This is another method of easing that difference between you know, the 2018 and the 2024.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have an amendment to delete that control section in our.
Correct.
Interior.
Now, I don't know though, if you go into the 3.3, is that gonna be something you're gonna have to do for
I don't
Energy
know.
Star? But we haven't studied it.
We haven't studied
I
Energy
think
Star.
Maybe as a
But
committee,
I
we
think-
need to study the maybe 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3.
But I think, I think doing like Dan was suggesting, maybe I don't know enough about 3.2, but at least if anybody does it, Energy Star 3.3, then I would think the local jurisdiction would accept that. But it's 3.2, whether you would accept it or not, and I don't know. I don't know enough about 3.2. And 3.2, realize if it matches above what 2021 was, then that all is higher insulation values and all that other
Yes, I
stuff.
don't think they're gonna want to use it.
But see, we've already, and that's what I guess I'm going to for the energy code here. We've already made amendments that to try to soften the blow from those costs, right? So to try to keep the cost down. So we're not requiring the occupancy sensors. We felt that was a safety issue, right? So
But if you accepted the alternate method, say Energy Star, and it
I
requires
think-
those components to go in, you can't override that with an amendment that we have to the IECC, because the amendment would apply to following the basic IECC method.
that would be my guess.
This is Clayton with the city. That is correct. In order to qualify for Energy Star, you would need to meet all of their requirements. We cannot amend Energy Star locally. But the two amendments that are currently on our proposed package include the occupancy sensors inside the building, the controls for exterior lighting, and you could also match the Valley's amendments for the ERI.
This is Dan, Ken, this is the plan checklist that, it shows all three versions, 3.1, 3.2.
Mr. Chair, this is David Zaba. Question for staff. Is the intent to take the commercial and residential amendment to the council and to the board before that? And what's the timing on this? And could there be, I don't want to keep, the intent is not just to delay for delay, but if there are some of these questions that we need more technical expertise, is there time to allow for that, or are you on a tight time frame?
This is Clayton with the city. We are not on an absolute time frame. No time frame has been established already. Our intent was to go back to mayor and council before the end of the year, but also we have to go back anyway for middle housing, some other topics. So we will be going back to mayor and council before the end of the year, regardless of the energy code. It would be convenient if we could have a package to take. But also, it is not the city's intent to implement a newly adopted energy code before July 1st of next year, simply because we still want to create a calm check model that is unique to the city, and there's going to be time necessary to do that. We can't initiate a custom calm check to be designed for the city of Tucson until after our mayor and council adopt. They won't create a custom software for us until they know for sure what our amendments are going to be. And so we want to bake in a little bit of time for that software to be available to our applicants. So there would be a delayed implementation.
This is David again. I appreciate that clarification. Clayton, I think that as you call it, ERI could have some interest or be worth having further discussion.
We have a few comments from Jim Myers, and it might just be easier if you could speak and be all right if we could hear Jim.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Jim Myers with Sweep. Just a few comments. I wish I was there to be able to answer some comments. So I'm looking at 3.3. Ken, I'm not seeing a direct, and I don't know Energy Star New Homes as well as I should. I'm not seeing a direct reference to the IECC with 3.3. It does have its own prescriptive table values for 3.3, which I'm not looking at the 2018 in front of me, but comparing it looks like the 2024 or 2018 with ceiling and walls. I'm not seeing any, it doesn't look like the 2021 that they're referencing. It also has SEER 2. That was a question you had, Ken.
Tier 2 in which version?
In 3.3.
Okay, what about 3.1?
I didn't look at 3.1,
Okay.
but I could look that up. I'm at 3.2. Next comment I had to do with ERI scores. So Phoenix, unless you've heard differently, Clayton, they have not changed the ERI. They kept the ERI scores in the 2024 base code, and Mesa is going through their process and their amendments now, and they're not proposing to amend those ERI scores also, that they're proposing to leave them. I know City of Phoenix looked at the average scores, the median scores that were happening through ResNet energy ratings, and they saw that the energy code aligned with what was happening in their area in the Phoenix Valley. So that was the reason for them staying with those ERI scores. Those were my comments.
I mean, so this is Ken. I would encourage Sava and others to look at what we've done for the amendments on the residential portion too, because I think what we're trying to do is, again, soften the blow in this big jump and make it and still provide the improved efficiencies, you know. And so but I think trying to go like 3.1 or something like that, I think would be challenging for us because we just don't know enough about it at this point. And we need to research that more. But I think I'm not aware of anything in the residential section other than what we've gone through in the past and amended that I would want to really push to change. So I'm thinking at this point, I think I think if Energy Star is going to be accepted, I think that would be just between with the jurisdiction. Yeah, and not necessarily an amendment, right? So would be my thought.
Dave, it sounds like we've done reasonable work, reasonable accommodations to amend the IDCC to be better for residential.
Both commercial and residential, right?
Going back with obsolete data, it's really hard to check compliance, so
Right.
why not?
Oh, yeah, this is Rick. So I think we're pretty much settled on the residential energy code requirements with our amendments.
And
So the
the,
question is, what is an acceptable alternative? So what you're saying is that should be a determination made by building officials. Right?
that's what I'm kind of leaning towards, because I don't want to review another code. So, this one was hard enough.
But the building officials will make that determination because, or allow the alternative because they believe it is more stringent
Correct,
in overall
correct, and it is.
the code as adopted.
Because it does, you read through it and it says, if it's 3.1, it needs to be, it refers to the IEC throughout and just requires you to be better than the IEC. That's the 2018 ICC. If it's a 3.2, I think it refers to the 21 ICC in references. So I think that, I would think that it would be.
I guess it's making me wonder, is it more of a process and documentation side that you like the Energy Star better, or is it the actual, what you will have to be building?
So this is Brennan with Saba. Energy Star utilized by builders is also a marketing tool to market, and they are being more energy efficient. And so therefore, they're telling their buyers that this is a cost savings down the road as well. So we are looking from an affordability standpoint, what market is driving, what the regional approach is. I mean, everything on the table. We would just like to see that, hey, from the current standard, maybe a more incremental approach than going shock and awe from 2018 to 2024, the significant increases that will accommodate. So that's Saba's perspective.
John, unofficially with Saba on this topic. I'm not an energy expert, but I do believe it might be prudent to see what TEP might be doing in the future relative to Energy Star and any potential rebate programs. They've often rebated based on Energy Star. I believe that might be going away. I'd be curious to see what their plans are in the future based on the new 2024 and potential future Energy Stars. So I think I'll recap what I heard David say, was that we would appreciate the opportunity to research the idea of a reduced ERI as a code amendment before we were okay with the code amendment.
And this is Clayton with the city. Just to clarify, according to the municipal documents online, the city of Tolleson has amended their ERI from 51 to 55. The city of Chandler has amended their ERI from 51 to 57.
And this is I mean, the only time we really get in, we do more. The only time mechanically that we get into and see a lot of Energy Star on our side is on the mechanical side is when we're doing low income housing, because there's a funding they have to go through, that funding requirement, that 0.9 whatever funding. And so they have to go through and everything has to be HERS rated, Energy Star. And so then that's the time that we have to then go through these documents and meet that. But that's usually because of funding that they're receiving.
For the equipment, not.
No, it's the whole building.
Oh, it is the whole building.
Yeah. So you have to have, and with these, you have to have a HERS rater that has to come in and they do their energy model, which is different than this energy model, totally different. They don't even correlate. So because they're coming up with a HERS rating and they have to meet a certain value, HERS value. So
HERS and Energy Stars are just alternatives to the energy.
correct. Right.
And they're all a little bit different. not exactly the same.
And I don't even know if it's an alternative in many cases. And a lot of times with the low-income housing, you still have to meet this, but you also have to do the Energy Star for the funding. So it's a,
You have to meet
Yeah.
the current code and
Correct.
hers.
right.
Or Energy Star.
Right.
You guys think you have it? Any other comments? Well, I guess the question is, where do we stand on that?
This is Ken. I mean, for me, I feel comfortable on how we would move forward with designs and I think, and how we would suggest people to move forward. And I think, and I feel real comfortable with our current amendments that we have. And I can't think of any altering it that I would do unless, as we go through and start going through the codes, we will find it. I mean, it's a pretty thick code book, so it's going to take, just like the building code, you don't know where things are until you've found them.
They sneak them in there. don't
Right,
they?
right. So, but I think we've gone through it fairly thoroughly enough that we can go ahead and move forward with it. And
Today, rather than wait for any further study on the Energy Star.
Right, because the Energy Star thing, we could always add in the future and it doesn't impact at least the com check or anything else.
Yeah, and this is Dan, with the county. I just wanted to read the first sentence of the above code program. It just says the code of it's section R 104.1.1. For the commercial, and they have the same section and is, R1 residential, but code official or other HJ shall be permitted to deem a national, state, or local energy efficiency program to exceed the energy efficiencies required by this code. That's where I think Energy Star, the building official, has the right to allow Energy Star to be an alternative.
So you have to decide whether it's 3.2 or 3.3.
Yeah.
Right? Like that determination.
Unless we could find a way to amend the ERI, which might make 3.1 qualify for exceeding the amended 2024 code.
Well, this is Clayton with the city. I can definitely see the logic of that. We would need an analysis to demonstrate.
And this is Ken. I would think that'd be somebody like Desert Sky or somebody like that, that is a energy rater that would be able to provide that. Would be my guess. That's who I would probably turn to.
The Desert Sky.
Yeah, someone like that. I know there's a couple others out there, but
Right.
yeah, that's who we usually use.
That would require a code of it.
Pardon me?
That would require a code of it.
No, Clayton was just asking if if they would accept that. I think that would be one way of showing how it performs.
This is Clayton with the city. So an appeal is always available to applicants if they want to justify an alternative. That's an avenue that's always open and available. I think really what we're talking about is a prescriptive alternative that is available without an appeal.
Which would require a code of it.
Correct.
So so my thought again is that it sounds like if we could always adopt this as is,
With the amendment.
current amendments that we have, and then we could always add to it in the future.
This is Clayton with the city. I just want to also point out that we're planning on scheduling quarterly meetings moving forward through, 2026. So you have, ample opportunity to meet on a quarterly basis to continue discussing this.
Right. And at least And at least this amendment, this can, and at least this amendment with the Energy Star would not impact the com check. Because it just says it's an alternative method. It's not, it wouldn't be anything with it. And that's, I guess, what I'm pushing for
Oh,
is
yeah, that's a good point.
I want
because
that com check to be, so right now the com check's available, but there is no drop jurisdiction on any of them. So that's why I don't understand how these other jurisdictions are getting it approved, because they do have local amendments, but they probably just are scratching it out as they do it. Yeah. Or they're just doing the energy model. Yeah.
You know, we're kind of in a position where we need to move forward. So I get these other folks, you know, starting on their process with the rest check and comp check for the local amendments.
And if we don't do it today, what will we know a month from now that's different? Like it's gonna be any different.
Right.
Well, if it goes to mayor and council, it gets adopted by the end of the year. It's not gonna be implemented until July. So there's 6 months to deal with these issues.
This is Brendan with Saba. Clayton, how viable is your proposal to use the ERI? And if that would then accommodate the Energy Star that John had referenced, is that, can we get that in language and then adjust as needed? Just so we can be more conservative with the town.
This is Clayton with the city. We're not in a position to assign what difference percentage wise any difference in ERI would have on the current code. We would need to perform an analysis to even determine if 55 has a certain percentage difference or 57 has a different percentage. We don't know at this time. But the viability is actually here because it's the building code committee that makes the recommendation to mayor and council. So they, this is the committee that would hear that viability.
I think, sorry, John with Saba, I think my request would be to delay adopting until next month, at least have a month to review that viability of a changed ERI score and how that translates to an Energy Star improvement. I think in summary, the production building industry would very much like to maintain the 3.1 Energy Star as the rule, and we believe that can exceed a 2024 IECC standard if that IECC is adopted with a revised ERI, but we don't know that for sure. And we'd like that month to try to prove that up.
Like this, we delayed it a month. That means it wouldn't be on the mayor and council agenda until next year.
That is correct. This is Clayton with the city. If we delay past today's meeting for recommendation to mayor and council, we most likely will not get on an agenda until January at the earliest.
So, but moving it forward today does not eliminate the ability to address these issues that the home builders are.
That is also correct.
Given that that issue is just for the alternative method of compliance, is it even necessary to be part of the ordinance? Because it's more a matter of what your policy would be in accepting that alternative method.
This is Clayton with the city. So adjusting the ERI should occur in an amendment that is part of the ordinance. Accepting an alternative design could be done at any time, right? Because we've already acknowledged through our amendments that above code programs and alternative designs are acceptable. But adjusting that ERI would be a change to the code, which would need to occur in the amendments.
So this is Ken. You mentioned that some of these jurisdictions that have already adopted this and what they changed their ERI, because the ERI is 51, but they changed it to 57. What did the other one change it to?
55. Chandler changed to 57. Tolleson changed to 55.
But that would be then a higher. Is that it's lower? Okay.
I wonder how they arrived at those particular numbers.
Right.
This is Clayton with the city. I'm pretty sure that's a carryover from previous amendments. I don't know for certain, but that is my assumption.
Well, I don't know how they arrived at the number of the code either, for that matter.
So just, this is Ken again, just to let everybody know. So that's in table 4R 406.5. Page 338.
That impact the res check?
So apparently, so what, this is Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but because I'm just not familiar with these sections that much. It sounds like that is an alternative rating compliance tool that can be used to show that you're in compliance with the code.
This is Clayton. That is correct. There's one of 3 compliant paths.
Right. Oh, I see. And it's a maximum ERI value, right?
Jim from Sweep posted in a comment that the ERI does not affect the res check.
It does not.
Right, because the res check, this is Ken, the res check is related to the com check, or is related to the energy code and not a different compliance method, correct?
Jim, would you like to speak further to that?
Yeah, Ken, that is Jim with Sweep here. That is correct. It's one of the pathways in the IECC, even in the 2018 IECC. So you have the prescriptive pathway, you have the UA, which is now called the TC, which is res check, and then you have ERI, and then you have performance. So those are the multiple pathways. And so ERI and performance are based off of the tables and the prescriptive requirements, but not the opposite. So you can make changes to ERI and it would not affect res check.
So, yeah, so this is Ken. So again, we could go ahead and still adopt what we have. We could always go back and change the ERI value without it affecting the res check or the com check programming. Because it's a different it's just an alternative method. Again, my thought is I just want to get the com check, this in front of com check and res check to get on board, so that by July we have the local amendments in those programs. Because we really, Clayton, I'm asking, I was thinking it's going to take at least 4 to 6 months for them to implement and have that implemented into there. Is that
This is Clayton. That is my assumption. We haven't heard a timeline. It's also relative to their workload,
right?
Which varies.
It could change dramatically next month.
If everybody's making amendments.
I will say
they'll be
this.
overwhelmed.
Right.
The sooner we get in, and like the sooner
Maybe
we'll get back,
it's
but
in line.
Also,
right.
like if 24 other jurisdictions adopt, right, after we do or before we do, it could impact their turnaround time.
Right. So this is Ken. So my thought is, again, the Energy Star or the ERI rating won't impact those things, and we could always add those.
Codified it.
Yeah, add those to the amendments at a later date as an alternative, as alternative paths. I'm just trying to get this ICC
Well, there are other
amendments
things
in,
that other
so-
people have to do. So we need to get that ball rolling.
Right. And we still will be meeting and talking about this ERI rating and the Energy Star, but at least that ball's rolling on getting it through so that we could get into our queue for the com check. Because if we adopt the IECC in July and we don't have a com check, it's going to be really challenging for all design professionals, including the city and county, to review those documents, because there won't be
What would happen in that case?
Yeah,
July rolls around and it's effective, but we don't have a rest check or a comp check.
It would, this is Clayton with the city, it would prove a higher complication for everyone involved.
Well, it's not just that the con check is available the day before it becomes effective.
Correct.
It needs to
Months
move
before.
back, it needs to move back some as well.
because we're in
Because you-
design.
uh, Either that or it's gonna delay a bunch of drawings going in. Because
Right.
you can't get to that.
So this is Ken, so that's why I think the urgency for me is to move this forward.
If there was a motion, could the motion be contingent upon the effective date being contingent upon when the comp check is available, a certain number of days after the comp check is available, or whichever's later, the July.
This is Clayton. That would be extremely difficult because the ordinance needs to be written with specific dates.
Okay.
So can you have an effective date and then a grace period?
Correct. So, we can have multiple dates, it's adopted on, November 18th, but not effective until July 1. That can be written into the ordinance. What can't be written into the ordinance is 90 days after some external agency completes the process.
But you can write in a grace period,
Correct.
like a 6 months or 3 months, whatever grace period.
Well,
Precisely.
yeah, for example, we've already done that
Right.
with all our other codes that we've adopted. They were adopted, like for the county in July, but they don't have an effective date until January 1st. So this would be the same thing.
Well, if we get to June and there's no comp check, can we have, then what happens?
This is Clayton with the city. It is certainly possible to go back to to mayor and council to request additional modification. That's possible, but we would need to get back on an agenda to do such a thing.
So maybe by May, we need a certain amount of time built into this thing, because we don't want to have a trap set based on dates that we don't know when can actually have the program available.
So this is Ken, I think that we can have, we're currently meeting, we were gonna meet quarterly in 26, but what we could do is meet, after March, if still nothing, we could meet in April or May again and schedule another meeting just to review that.
This is Clayton. We'd be happy to accommodate your schedule.
I'm comfortable.
Okay.
Someone will make a motion to.
This is Ken, and I make a motion to adopt the amendments that as currently written for Pima County and City of Tucson.
For the adoption of the 2024 IECC.
For the adoption of the 2024 ICC. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Is there a second?
This is Dennis, I'll reluctantly second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. We'll have to be dealing with this again next year.
Right.
This doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away. And this is Ken, and we're still going to deal with the ERI and Energy Star in additional meetings.
So we need that on the agenda for addition.
Right. I think
This is Clayton with the city. We'll be sure to include ERI as a specific agenda item on future meetings.
All right, I hope so. Everybody's done analysis of that you know.
Not yet. Not that I'm aware of. It may be out there. I just haven't seen it.
And this is Ken, and I could reach out to, like I said, Desert Sky and see what, they'd be the only ones that would be aware of this. Like Quest Energy, I don't think does any of this stuff. So It's more the Desert Sky folks than the Energy Star folks.
So we move on to item number 4 on the agenda. Grading residential lots. So we get a presentation this morning.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. We've got several here in the room. We've got John Ward and Greg Mole, who were the president last 2 meetings ago, and then this had been extended for time for presentation. I can't read who's online, but we may also have additional civil engineers. Ryan Stuckey, if he's still on, and Tanya Washington, and I'm not sure if Corey made it, but there are several in the industry that have expressed similar concerns to what you're about to hear from John Ward. And with that, I turn it to him.
Mr. Chair, would it be all right if I sat at the table for this?
Asking.
Would it be all right if I sat at the table for this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, interested constituents listening in. As Brendan mentioned, we were going to discuss this a couple meetings ago. I unfortunately had audio problems on my remote connection, and so I asked for the opportunity to delay the opportunity to present. For introduction of myself, I'm John Ward. I am a former home builder, land developer, now just a practicing civil engineer and licensed contractor, and a member of the Saba Tech Committee and Board of Directors at Saba. This discussion regarding minimum lot drainage requirements for single-family residences. Quick little background. The genesis of this conversation really stems from some asks of various regulatory agencies to consider options for improving affordability of housing. Grading of lots is a huge cost in our efforts, and we think this is an opportunity to improve cost of grading. There was also some subsequent or not subsequent, but simultaneous conversations going on with regulatory agencies as well relative to low intensity development goals and how changing drainage on lots could improve some of those low intensity goals. As a quick recap, I'm sure you're all fully aware of how the IRC reads, particular, and honestly, the IBC reads very similarly, that minimum slopes must be maintained away from a building and towards an approved point of collection or conveyance system. I'm not going to read that verbatim. I will note that the City of Tucson's UDC modifies the IRC a little bit. I don't know if it's necessarily a modification of the IRC, but the City of Tucson's UDC does allow for a 2% slope towards drainage facilities with an allowed exception of 1% in certain conditions. I'm not familiar with any other jurisdictions that have similar language to the City of Tucson's. I've searched, I can't find it. If you turn the page, I think before we get too deep into this conversation, I want to identify that I'm not entirely certain that this is a conversation to request a code. As we as an industry have worked through this along with some assistance from some of our building official friends, we think that the conversation is really about addressing the conveyance swales or drainage swales adjacent to and parallel to buildings, not so much about the slope away from them. I think the code really only speaks to minimum slopes away from buildings. So I just kind of want to point that out, that if we find in this conversation there is a relative code amendment possible, that's great. But if not, I greatly appreciate feedback and input as to what the committee concerns may be. I pass these out so you can look at these at your leisure, and I want to be expedient with time. So I'm going to ask to turn the page again. And we'll go to kind of the historical practices. The details at the top of the sheet that I'm showing you are typical lot grading details that are reflected on a set of civil engineering plans. Not so much on a house building plan. Instead on a mass grading site, wherein we are demonstrating, or what the accepted practice has been for 20 years in every jurisdiction has been to show that there is a possibility to provide 1% swales from the farthest corner of a lot to the point of outlet to a street or a drainage way or something. To be perfectly honest, I do not know. I've been in this town developing for forever and a day. I do not know where that 1% came from. I do believe that the historical practice of 1% is part of why the cities got the 1% exception allowed in their UDC. I think the 1% became a standard norm before the city adopted that, but I can't be certain on that. What's of interest is that in the greater Phoenix MSA, these very similar details are permitted to be shown on civil engineering plans at 0.5%. Now, to just kind of add a little context to that showing the opportunity for a 1% or a 0.5% slope is really the basis of how the pad elevation gets established, and ultimately the finished floor elevation gets established, unless there's some other reason for the finished floor to be established at a certain elevation, like a floodplain, adjacent floodplain. But for on-lot drainage, it's about establishing a minimum pad height to provide that opportunity to get the water off the lot. Again, going fast for the purpose of allowing room for discussion, and I know you've already been here for a long time. Return the page again. I'll beg forgiveness for my crude sketches. I am not an artist, and I could not employ my staff to do this because this is volunteer work for me. So one of the concerns about the 1% minimum is in standard practice with, say, a production build lot where we have 5-foot side yards. We'll have a 45-foot wide lot, a 35-foot wide product with 5-foot side yards. And with the depth of the lots being typically in the 120-foot range, we are needing to create an elevation difference between the pad and our sidewalk grade in the range of 1.4 to 1.6 feet. If you'll look at this exhibit that I've shown, I've got an established pad grade creating that 1.4 to 1.6 feet. That, again, that's dependent on the actual lot dimensions, but these are typicals. You put a slab on top of that, and then you try to create that 1% slope. That swale flow line ultimately ends up needing to be considerably lower than the slab elevation as it approaches the front yard. And for ease of conversation, we're just talking about the front yard, front draining lots. But a similar situation happens with rear draining lots. Our proposal would be to accept a 0.5% drainage flow line, which would ease that delta between the bottom of the slab and the invert of a swale that's within 2 or 3 feet of the slab. Again, this is not relative to the slope away from the building. This is the conveyance channel. Just below there, you have a little exhibit where it kind of shows a cross section of a typical side yard. You've got a slab with a variable slope coming away from the slab to an invert. Kind of two options are shown. One with the invert of the channel being invert of the swale being centered in that 5 feet. Another one would be if you did an extended depth footing on a wall adjacent, you could push that invert farther closer to the wall to accomplish that. Again, maintaining the minimum slope away, but asking for the 0.5% in this conveyance swale. So that delta between invert and slab is of concern. Another huge concern is the resultant impact to driveway slopes. In the production build environment, we typically have an 18 to 20-foot front setback to the garage to allow a car to park in the driveway without obstructing the sidewalk.
You know, that 1.6 feet spread across a 20-foot driveway is, gosh, I had that math in my head and I forgot what it was. It puts you in the 10 to 12% range. However, when we have to add in the barrier-free accessibility requirements, if you have barrier-free accessibility to the front door, you have to have 5 feet, the top 5 feet of your driveway needs to be at a 2%. So then you only have 15 feet of driveway to make up that 1.6 feet of vertical difference. Or if you are doing your barrier-free in the garage, that actually elevates your garage, the lip of your garage up 4 inches. Again, just increasing that vertical difference while maintaining 20 feet. So picture 10 to 12% driveway slopes as the standard and the norm with these 1%. When we measure that against FHA maximum requirement or maximum slope of 13 to qualify for FHA funding, you know, you don't leave enough room or very much room for variabilities. I suppose I could offer the opportunity to ask questions, but if you'll bear with me, I've just got a few more minutes and then I'll go to questions. Bottom half of this page, we really start talking about not so much what this 1% does to on lot situations, but instead what it does on a larger effect to a production built subdivision. The 1% create substantial grade differentials between the pad and the streets, and also substantial differences between the pad and adjacent pads, whether it be side to side or rear to rears. I've drawn a little cross section here showing kind of a corner lot situation. You've got a blue rectangle representing the slab, your typical 5-foot side yard with a small swale, property line, the side property line of a lot with a wall on it, and then you need to make up this grade adjustment down to the sidewalk. And if that grade adjustment is more than a foot, which it always is with 1% slopes, you either need to allow for a common area so you can have a slope, which translates into wasted space, less utilization of the land, less affordable housing, or you have to build a retaining wall. On back-to-backs, I've got an example, a snip from a typical grading plan where you can see the effect of back-to-back lots. If you looked at lots 136 to 129, you have you know, almost 6.5 feet of delta between those two lots. Now it's relative to the terrain that you're building on, but even in the flattest scenarios, you're going to have 1 to 2 feet of differential on your back-to-back lots in that scenario. So in summary, we just wanted to kind of address a couple of opportunities that we identified. When it comes to cost and affordability, we see that a potential change to a half a percent minimum slope allows us to keep all of our pads closer to say a 0.8 to 1 foot differential to our streets rather than the 1.6 to 1.8 differential. That in itself, just grading costs, or it has the effect of eliminating retaining walls and riprap slopes. Not every lot benefits from that, but if you said that would benefit 1 out of every 8 lots and would save about $4,000, all of a sudden you're looking at a $500 savings per lot. If you look at just the change relative to cost of grading, say half a foot to 0.8 of a foot change in grading saves about 120 cubic yards of earth moving. Typical earth moving costs at $3.50 a cubic yard equates to another $420 per lot savings. And then lastly, and this is the big ticket one, it seems in today's current environment and the parcels we're building on, almost every project ends up being an import project where we have to haul dirt in, and we're having to haul this dirt in to elevate pads relative to street grades. If we were to lower all of our pads by half a foot, not changing streets, just changing pads, we're cutting out 120 cubic yards of import on a typical import project at $20 per cubic yard, saving about $2,400. I think this is where we've garnered some support from some leadership in some of the municipalities, because we're able to cite that we think we could save, easily $3,000 a lot, even perhaps more, if we could make this adjustment. And so they encouraged us to proceed with these types of conversations. Going back to that accessibility discussion, when the lowering of the pads relative to the street would allow us to have driveways that are closer to 4 to 6% instead of 10 to 12% in slope, much more accessible for visitors. If you really think about it in today's environment, with what we currently are required to do, almost none of our production built lots are accessible from the street. You almost have to have a visitor enter the garage, park in the garage to be able to have accessibility to the house, just because they can't either make it up to the front door from the street, or they can't park on the driveway because the driveway is too steep. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize the importance of street scene. Seems like about every 3 to 5 years we get tagged from a local municipality about improving the quality of our street scenes. Flatter front yards, flatter driveways, not only promote street scene through enhanced vegetation opportunities, but also has an impact on low impact development opportunities, with better chances to create micro basins in front yards, and also promoting healthier, stronger tree growth. With that, I will stop talking and leave it open for questions, and I'll be relying on my fellow compadres to help me answer questions.
In addition, this is Brennan with Sava. This is my August 19th letter to you guys. I just brought copies of this.
Well, this is Rick. I have one thing that concerns me is the 0.5%. I do a lot of commercial parking lots. And when you drain down the driveway, 0.5%, you have to do a concrete gutter because you cannot hold that 0.5%. So it's even worse with dirt, holding that 0.5%. The concern is you don't want water. Funding against that. So how do you address that?
That's a fair point. If you would turn back to, say, page 3, we have an acknowledgement in the exhibit. I'm sorry, page 4. In the exhibit at the top, you have I've drawn a blue line from the back of the lot to kind of the front endpoint of the pad, and I've noted that is all too often the end result, where in our process of building the homes, during civil construction, the pad is built flat, and then the slab gets installed on top, and then after the slab is built, finished grading is done, shaping for the driveway, shaping for the sidewalk at the street, as well as cutting these swales along the side of the house. All too often, that 0.5%, or I'm sorry, that 1% is not even met. We're gonna just straight up acknowledge that, because we don't have good mechanisms to require a validation of the drainage. One of the suggestions that has been thought of is perhaps we have a third-party certification requirement as part of building final. It would obviously need to be certified before decomposed granite was installed in the yard, because rock can hide the imperfections in the grading. There would be some training required. Several of the builders in town do already have these third-party inspections being done, not as a requirement, but as a best practice. And we know that if this were a plausible path, there would need to be some additional training of the professional industry on how to certify these. Relative to your comment on parking lots, I agree. when you're talking relative to pavement, the last thing you want is any bird baths in pavement. We do, public streets are allowed to be built at 0.5%. We successfully pull those off in street application. I think relative to dirt, when you're trying to drain dirt, I would venture that the goal isn't to eliminate all ponding, but to not allow any substantial ponding, right? A 1/2 inch of water ponding near a building isn't detrimental. You want to move the majority of the water out. But that's just my opinion. And certain soil conditions would bear different results.
Yeah, so this is Rick again. So you've only got 5 feet to get this water out from behind the house on each side. You're doing it at 0.5%. The problem is, how do you maintain that 0.5% over the life of the building? It may be perfect at 0.5% when you leave the job site, but 2, 3 years, 5 years down the road, that could be eliminated on the foundation. I don't know what your thoughts are, Dave.
Listen, Dave, that would be, even at perfect installation at 0.5%, can we show that this lot clears away from the foundation enough to satisfy most geotechnical reports, which also have the same requirement of usually 2% away in 5 feet. So now we have, I can understand your conundrum. We've got multiple competing things going on here. But I think one of the biggest ones is like, is this house gonna settle?
Yeah, that's the big concern.
Yeah, because when we get water, it's when we get the subsidence.
I mean, my house, it drains like every other house, but it's got more than 5 feet.
Mhm.
But I mean, I have to watch it because easily, over the course of years, people do stuff and they're not civil engineers or structural engineers. And they do stupid stuff at 0.5%. It just provides quite an opportunity to create a ponding situation.
Sure.
And you guys are long gone.
We've heard that
That's a
concern.
comment too. So my name's Greg Maughan with Sunbelt Holdings, and I'm also a Saba board member, and I talked to you guys virtually a couple months ago. So again, we're getting into the 2 different scenarios here. There's away from the house, and then there's also a backyard to the front.
Right.
And so, those 2 things we have to make sure we keep separate, but also, no question, there's a homeowner maintenance component to all these things. Most builders now have, a 10-year warranty. And if there's something wrong with the grade, there are callbacks on grade that they go back and fix. But no question, the homeowner has to maintain their lot the same as you or I have to maintain our lot in our house. We can't expect to build anything that's gonna last in perpetuity with no homeowner maintenance. So I would discount some of that as to, there has to be maintenance. And if the homeowner sees changes in the grade or a huge storm event that changes his grade, he has to go back to the building.
Well, yeah, but I've seen too many other houses where the grade is modified for years.
Well, and there,
Is that something that the homeowners should be expected to realize? That my experience is that they don't.
there's a fine line there likely, but also I would submit in the Phoenix market, we as developers have built thousands of lots and thousands of homes have been subsequently constructed at that 0.5% detail that John presented. So it's not something that's not workable or that, is a problem in other markets where it's a standard. So, that's just another example.
So this is Ken. I guess my question is are you looking at your changing that swale slope, not necessarily a slope away from the building, correct?
Right. Correct.
The floor is already 6 inches above grade.
Right.
Adjacent to the building.
Right.
12.
Well, it's 6 inches minimum.
Right.
So the concern of the foundation is, Dennis, gonna be more at the high end than at the low end, because in a 5-foot side yard, you've gotta be, if you're even going down at 0.5%, you're getting low at the low end relative to the house.
Right.
But at the upper end, you haven't gone down quite as much, so within 5 feet, how you get down to that swale and keep from ponding against the house, that seems. The 1%'s the back to front fall, but from the house into that swale, you still gotta keep the 1% in order to.
Well, it's,
Ordinance.
the code requires it to drop 6 inches within the first 10 feet. If you have lots that are, you can't meet that 10 feet,
Which is most lots.
with most lots, you're allowed to do swales. Now, the code will let you go down to 2% if it's an impervious surface. Impervious surface could be compacted soil, obviously concrete or whatever. So that's what the code allows. I personally think we're talking two different animals here. We got an initial, oh, no, let me finish, Rick, at least let me finish. Got the initial lot, which to the builders is to do the 1% slope. Then you build the house. What do you do to that lot? You tear it all up. You're digging plumbing lines, you're digging everything else. Then when the house is finished, typically before the landscaping is done, then you do your grading away from the house, making sure everything's going good. So you got that. So that's why I'm saying it's two different animals. Because you're gonna have a finished grading that's gonna have to take place when you're finishing the house, that the contractor, Tom, in his case, would need to do.
Right.
But when the lot's being done, in the case of the production builders, they're doing a whole subdivision. So they're doing those more flat to make it easier to start the house.
So they set the grade at the street and at the back of the lot,
Mhm.
and then at the end, they fine grade it.
Right.
So the concern is.
I just wanted to say,
Causing ponding against the building.
well, I wanted to address that too. Now, we just had our ASBO training in Phoenix. The Felton Group did a presentation on post-tension slabs. And they admit that the issue could be ponding and would cause issues with the slab. But from their experience in the different areas they work in, it hasn't been the drainage away from the house or the drainage on lots. It's been homeowners planting plants too close to the.
That's my point.
And none of us can stop that. We can make sure that it's okay at the initial, when the house closes, but none of us have any control over what a homeowner does to their own house at a later date. We cannot play the what if games. I don't think that's possible to play a what
Well,
if.
that's what we do all the time, right?
Well,
We have to, a certain amount of guarding people against their own stupidity.
right.
But let me, look, you guys don't gutter the houses?
And Greg from Sunbelt again, it's dependent on the site and the geotech report that someone referenced earlier. In some cases where we know there's potential for expansive soils and issues there, and absolutely the homeowner will gutter, or I'm sorry, the home builder will gutter every single house to help convey that water out to the front. And a lot of times they just spit it right on the driveway and it flows right over all the concrete out to the street. So yeah, it's site dependent, but in some cases they do.
I guess my point is the gutters direct the flow.
Sure.
That the homeowner doesn't have an opportunity to mess up.
True. Yeah, the gutters are a huge help, and some home builders do that as a matter of course everywhere because they've had problems with foundations or settling or what have you. And again, it depends largely on the project and the soil's conditions.
Depending on what part of the country you're in.
Well, and around here, it could be, a half mile that way is way different than right here, depending on what that geotech report in Sanford says.
So this 0.5% would require a geotech report?
I think yes, all of our projects are dependent upon a geotech report.
I think there is a geotech report with every subdivision that is developed.
It's the minute we agree, and it's absolutely.
You guys require that soils report?
Well, the site group does, the group that reviews for the
They do,
subdivision
huh?
plans and stuff.
And again, Greg from Sentinel again. So part of what we're talking about, again, getting into where the responsibilities fall. So the civil engineering on the project, we're submitting that geotech report and that grading plan to development services. But by the time it gets to Dan or Clayton, those reports are found and they built, and they're looking at, you know, how the house is actually built. So typically in Tucson, and it varies, but in the production lot area, we're gonna build that subdivision and those lots, and then we leave it and turn it over, and then the home builder comes in and then they do all the vertical work. So we're talking about 1% on the grading plan. But then to Dan's earlier point, when the builder comes in, they have to, whether I build it 100% flat or with a backward slope or forward slope or however I leave it, it all gets changed when they build that house. And they have to go back in, reestablish that fine grade to flow away from the house and typically to the front. So that's what we're talking about. But we're looking for help to get some cost savings in the actual grading portion, and then the end result being better accessibility, you know, better neighborhoods, all of those things that John mentioned in his presentation.
If I can jump in, this is Ryan Stuckey with CEC. If I can jump in and build off of that, I think part of the issue that we've discussed is that the pad grade is what's set on that 1% going to the back of the lot, but then the slab, the FFE, ends up being as much as 12 inches higher than that. And it seems like if we dissociate the pad grade from the grading rule, it could help to solve the driveway issues. If we have the FFE set at a minimum rather than the pad grade, I think the issue, or part of the issue here, is these pad grades are set based on that elevation. And just going back to that diagram that John was showing, it already creates a steep driveway, and then you add the 12 inches for the slab, so the FFE is 12 inches higher than that, and it exacerbates the issue, but it doesn't help with the drainage on the side. The 1% or 0.5% swale going around the lot, it's basically independent at that point because that pad grade's already set, and you could drop that entire slab a foot and it wouldn't affect the drainage around the house. All it affects is that driveway slope. So I'd love to see some changes to how the pad grade is set and maybe reference the FFE instead of the pad grade as the minimum on the lot, because I think that would help a lot with the driveway slopes, which I think is the crux of this issue, and what we're all trying to solve is these steep driveways and allow for lower elevations on those.
Interesting. Commercial projects, you said, you tell them what the finished floor elevation is, right?
Yeah.
But not on subdivision.
If you go look at, again, Greg from Sunbelt, if you go and look at a subdivision after we grade it, and before we get any builders in there to go vertical, the lots are graded typically flat. And then each builder has their own little, preference on the detail that they like to have, but they establish a hinge point and then it drops down, and then typically there's a swale in front, which goes back up to the curb. So initially, we have stormwater pollution prevention and a kind of a swell behind a curb so that water stays and that soil stays back there. But it's a flat graded pad. And then when they come in and build their house, because they want to be building on a flat pad to establish a flat foundation. But then again, all that's torn up and then all of that's changed. So to them, flat pad is what they want. But then, so you have this elevated table of a pad, and then it drops way down to the street, initially, and you're like, holy crap, how's this gonna even, work? But then when the house gets put in, that front all gets softened out. But that ultimately depends on the differential from curb, to house pad. But that's what we're talking about.
No, and again, Ryan from CEC, and I'd argue, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but I'd argue that you could lower each of those pads a foot on 99% of the lots, and it would not affect the ability to drain around the house. All it affects is the driveway slope.
True. And typically, to John's earlier point, unless there's, flood elevation, surface water concerns, that's what Ryan said is accurate.
Yeah, it's a problem. The lots have gotten smaller, front yards have gotten smaller. Plus, you add in accessibility requirements on top of that.
you know, if you think back 30 years ago when the traditional lot was typically, you know, an 80 to 100-foot wide lot and only 60-foot deep, 1% drainage from back to front was a whole lot more easily accomplished. But in reaction to rising costs and affordability concerns, the market has gone to narrow, deep lots to leverage more lots against the infrastructure builds. So it's one of the, I really see this as one of these conundrums where, as I was putting this together, as I reviewed it with my fellow members, I struggled with trying to identify if this is really a IRC matter or not, and maybe it's more of a local development engineering discussion. But I thought it would be fruitful to at least bounce this off you all and hear your concerns, because ultimately, when push comes to shove, I think if I were to go to a municipal engineer and ask for this change on our civil engineering plans, they're immediately going to run to the building official and say, what do you think? You know, it's kind of one of these realms where nobody really wants to hold the cup of tea and be afraid of spilling it. As I noted in here, I don't know if this is an IRC amendment process, but I really do appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation with you all.
Some of these grading requirements are in the UDC, correct?
That is correct. This is Clayton with the city. I would, in response to that most recent statement, this is not an amendment issue for the IRC from our perspective, because we still want to maintain that minimum slope away from the foundation. And I don't see a proposal to change that. However, I would say in practice, it becomes a building official, building safety concern, because as we reduce that conveyance on the side yard, it becomes even more critical that we do maintain a slope away from the building. There's less flexibility, as it were, and that has the potential to potentially cause issues at the very, very end of the project, right? Because what we're talking about is the final conveyance swale, which is identified at time of building final inspection. So should that conveyance swale not be sufficiently draining away from the foundation, we would then be in the responsibility to require that, any landscaping is removed in order to maintain, or to redesign those swales to effectively convey the water away from the building and towards the street. So in short, no, I do not think it's an IRC issue, but it does raise a little bit more concern to make sure that we are maintaining positive drainage.
So how do you fix it? If you don't have the proper drainage?
This is Clayton. Any topical rock that may be installed would need to be removed, and the grade, that final grade, would need to be altered.
Because you can't change the finished floor.
Right.
Or made impervious.
That is certainly another option, right? Providing impervious side yard surfaces that provide that surface drainage. But again, we still,
nobody wants to come in after the fact and do that.
right? And especially because, again, from a logistical standpoint, what we're talking about from the city's perspective is what happens between the time of final inspection and closing, right? And if we are not called out for an inspection until, a few days before closing, and now we're in this position of saying, hey, you don't have positive drainage away from the foundation. You may have a 0.5% from the back to the front, but we can't determine that. What is determined is that you don't have 6 inches of fall away from the foundation. So sorry, you have to pull all that DG out and now, give us a better swale. That is a delay, right? That could cause negative impacts to the closing of the house, which we want to avoid.
It's not the best time to handle that.
So just one final point. I think the most successful implementation of this proposal would be also including an educational campaign for the builders that would be implementing it, to make sure that we're all on the same page, that, the critical need for that detail that's shown on page 3, that side yard cross section with the swale, that is absolutely critical to the success of this implementation.
This is Brendan with Saba. Should this amendment be made before, however, to implement, happy to provide ongoing discussions with all of our fellow members, more focused discussions also added to, or use you can use also a tech committee meeting. So there's ample opportunities to roll this out within our membership and beyond.
Well, that slope away from the building gets to be critical. You know, that's a problem in Tucson or Minnesota or Georgia. Water standing against the foundation is always a problem. And you guys don't do grading plans on each lot?
Not on production built lots.
Not on production?
No, I'll retract that and say,
No.
as part of the house permit process, we submit a plot plan with the footprint of the house shown on it. And that plot plan shows the exact same 1% arrows that the civil grading plans show. So they show that there is a path out there, but there is not a definition of how the swales are to be built.
Those are usually model plans, so it wouldn't necessarily reflect every single lot if there's variability between lots.
Correct.
This is Greg, each house has its plot plan submitted with its permit, and it shows, so they may.
So there will be an individual.
Yeah, but again, to John's point, they just have arrows that show how the drainage goes.
It's not like a grading plan on a commercial project.
Yeah.
I mean, we have access issues, drainage issues, and we have grades all over the place.
It's very simplistic. You could liken it to a cartoon sketch of the drainage.
Its true purpose is a zoning setback check.
Yes.
Custom homes, this is Dan, custom homes are a little different. They typically do have the grading plan showing. This is, I believe, to correct me wrong, if I'm wrong, John and Greg, this is strictly for your subdivision.
Yeah, we're production builds, SFRs. So this doesn't linger on too long, I'll repeat again, thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation. I appreciate hearing your concerns and, there might be further dialogue. I do want to just add that as this conversation has been going on in the industry for the last 6 months, there's also been this phenomenon particular to Pima County where the flood control district has a responsibility to review on-lot grading. It's an interesting quirk. We're not sure why they have it, but they recently, during this conversation, decided that 1% wasn't meeting the IRC. They read the IRC in a way, so they started requiring 2%, and that became problematic. That got worrisome. I actually hit pause for a few weeks and thought, I don't even know if I want to pursue this issue, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is for all the jurisdictions to then say, you know what, 1% isn't acceptable. We need to go to 2%. Well, if we did that, our production built houses would be sitting 3 and 4 feet above the street, not palatable in any way, shape, or form. But we decided that when the flood control district yields their on-lot review responsibilities and gives it back to development services, this issue would be resolved that we were having there. I think at a minimum, while we'd love to have the 0.5%, at a minimum, we'd like to bring this to light among all the jurisdictions, so that maybe there might be a way to, at a minimum, codify the 1% across all jurisdictions. Because right now the city's the only one that acknowledges 1% is acceptable. So I think, again, thank you for your time. This has been helpful to me as I report back to my members.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is Dave. As a structural foundation engineer, to make a 0.5% palatable to me, I would also like to see the foundations deepened. I know that's counterproductive to your cost saving, but that would be like a mitigation measure to me. No more shallow edge PT foundation, not at the 0.5%.
Right.
It would have to be at least a 12 inch.
Interesting.
And then at least we're founded at a deeper level It's harder to get that saturated, to get that to settle. There's dumb factor built in rather than, oh, it's all shallow and if this thing erodes, you know, now you're seeing the bottom of your foundation. That is rich.
Well, and Greg from Seminole again, so speaking to that concern. So on each subdivision, and typically each parcel within the subdivision, we have, we may have an overall geotech report that's, for the entire subdivision or something that we typically do at least an addendum to each parcel that may be, 100 lot parcel. And then that has its subsequent slab design, and that design may vary from parcel to parcel, but that's exactly what we're talking about, is that geotech engineer then has to take that geotech report, the grading report, and go in and design that slab. And some may say, we need a thickened edge, or, whatever it might be, or that overall thickness of the slab, depending on those factors. So I agree with what you're saying there, but I think that's site dependent and soil condition dependent.
So who's designing your P2 slabs? The
The
geotech?
builders have a geotech engineer, maybe the same guy who did.
And the structural?
Yes, and it may be related to the firm that did, the stuff for the grading plan, or maybe totally separate.
And this is Dan. I will say that in the cases of post tension and raft slabs, a soils report with each slab or foundation design is required. So in those cases, there's actually the soils report for the entire subdivision, and then there's one that's lot specific to ensure that the slab's being designed correctly.
So do the deborings for each lot?
I can't tell you what the,
I can answer that. They have, the Post Tension Institute has acceptable frequency of borings. I think it's typically 1 per every 20 lots. Provided that the geotech had witnessed the actual mass earth moving and knew that there was uniformity of the mass earth moving. If
The soil can vary quite a bit.
Right. Thank you again.
Anybody else? We're good? Okay, and we don't have to make a motion or anything on this item? We can move on to the call of the audience. Last chance,
We have one hand up online.
okay?
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Ian Wan, Planning Development Services, Code Development. I just wanted to speak to the previous item on the agenda for the grading. It was mentioned that we're working on low impact development standards. And as Brandon mentioned, we would like to, continue any further discussions with you guys just to kind of see how we can continue to mold out this code update and see how we can all kind of benefit from these changes as well. So we'll be reaching out to you guys just to continue those conversations and then hopefully come back to the committee at a future date with some updates as well.
Can you explain this low impact requirement?
Yeah, low impact development, really what we're looking to do is to update the commercial rainwater harvesting ordinance to bring in more opportunities to capture stormwater runoff at the subdivision phase of things.
So it's a hydrology.
Yeah, hydrology, looking for kind of a bigger canopy growth along neighborhoods, increase the more walkability, shade.
Anything else?
No, just wanted to express our support for that in the ongoing conversations, and then just hopefully come back to the committee once we get a better understanding of where we're at.
Everything is all about trade-offs, so it's good to discuss it. Okay, any other comments? Not hearing any further comments. I have a motion to adjourn.
Dennis, so moved.
Second,
this is Ben, I'll second.
all in favor?
Adjourned.
Any opposed?
When's their next meeting?
Is it in November?
November 19th.
November 19th.
Have that all.
The library.
Library?
Yeah.
Are you planning on?
Did this address that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one project have to be new, guys. Guess go the route of using an energy model.
Don't mind it.
Well, our very methods, most of them,
We don't need.
I think we're on the same foot. So if we're doing that, I'll wait to hear from you.
but I know that it's written, a 5,000 square foot lot. City. Energy.
Yep.
Change the question.
Yeah, it's always good to see you.
If you're doing 100,000 square foot building, you're probably doing 100.
Yeah, we, let's say if they leave, we'll need to push those tables back. It's up.
With energy monitoring.
Thanks, Dave.
Monitoring.
Monitoring, okay.
So how will
Thank you, Christy.
know if that
Making sure that we have these.
accurate year after?
City project. Yep, right. Thanks.
What's the problem? You're in a 5,000 square foot building.
Right.
Nobody knows how to interpret all that data they're getting. 100,000, you got, that's his sole job, and he just reviews all that data and makes adjustments. You don't get that on 5,000.
Just curious how people in the industry would go about back checking the energy model to see if it was
And you're.
accurate
Yeah.
enough to, I guess, to say to people you're